Welcome back, friends and family of the internet and fellow watchers on the wall. What if I told you I know where you live, where Satan's throne is? Do you know what that reference is alluding to? Revelations 2:12 through 13. Today, we are going to deep dive something called Satan's throne. It's real. The Bible referenced it, referenced the city it was in, and it has been moved in the 1800s, like the obelisk, right? Like the London Bridge, it has been moved to Berlin, Germany. However, we're not stopping there. I'm going to show you how Nicki Minaj has an alter ego, they call it. She's got a demon possession. And the name of the demon is Roman. Now, Satan's throne was built in a Roman city, a city located in Asia Minor, in Turkey to be exact, called Pergamon. Now, Pergamum is, it was, golly, guys, it was there in the first century. And Satan's throne was actually built to Zeus. I find it very odd that Turning Point USA had Nicki Minaj on the stage with the divine feminine Esther, ERIKA KIRK. And they're trying to present her as a decent role model, as somebody that has changed. So we're going to tie all this together, because I keep trying to explain to people the old gods, the little g gods are rising. That has to happen. So with no further ado, welcome back, guys, to Starkey Farmstead. My name is Samantha Starkey. I am the owner operator of a 2-acre farmstead located in Southeast Louisiana. I'm an organic no-till grower. I also recently published a book, Growing Under a Poisoned Sky, with a good friend of mine. I will link the way you can purchase our book. Please consider getting a few copies, passing them out as Christmas presents. It's an easy read. I don't care if you're in high school or you're 94 years old, you will enjoy those 88 pages. Can I get an amen? So here is something, we're going to start here. Evidence of Satan's throne in Pergamon. Pergamon, also spelled Pergamon, was an influential city in Asia Minor, located in modern-day Turkey. It rose to prominence under the Attalid kings around the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, and it was a cultural center for the Roman province of Asia, right? It had the second largest library in the world to the Alexandria Library. In fact, yesterday we were talking about the obelisk and the Cleopatra's needles that were moved to New York, to Paris, and into London, the Egyptian obelisk that they moved. Now, this is something that's really cool. When Mark Antony and the Roman and his army that was with him went through Pergamon, they actually ransacked this library, the second largest in the world. They took everything in the library and they took it with them to Cleopatra as a wedding gift to, the biggest library, Alexandria, which of course burned, if you believe that. I personally believe all of those documents were consumed by the Roman Empire, which then just rotated into the Roman Catholic Church. And it's in the, 33 miles of underground tombs? I think all of it's there. The thing about Pergamon, people need to understand, was it had pagan temples. It housed many notable religious cults, a lot of them. Now, here's the thing. This was Revelations 2:13. John actually writes a letter directly to the city of Pergamon. It's in the Bible. When I saw this, I was mind blown. It says, letter to the church in Pergamos, which is also Pergamon. It says, I know where you live, where Satan's throne sits, and you remain true to my name. You did not renounce your faith in me, even in the days when my faithful witness Antipas was killed among you, where Satan dwells. This verse indicates that believers in Pergamon were surrounded by significant spiritual opposition, described figuratively as Satan's throne. But here's the thing, there was actually a throne in Pergamon, and I'm fixing to show it to you. So there is some debate amongst biblical scholars. Is this a hypothetical spiritual Satan's throne? Because technically you could say America is Satan's throne right now. You've got San Francisco, you've got Miami, you've got New York, you know what I'm saying? You got New Orleans, you've got these hot spots. But the thing was that Pergamon was surrounded by significant spiritual opposition. The church was. Now, some people think that it was actually the throne. The Great Altar of Zeus is actually the throne of Satan that John is referencing in Revelations. Now, in the late 19th century, a German engineer led an excavation that unearthed portions of this grand altar. It was, marble, and it was beautiful. So they transported it to Berlin and they created a Pergamon museum. You cannot make this up. This gets me so excited about the Word of God. This is how real the Bible is, friends and family. This is how, I feel electrified with this information, because there it is. There it is in my Bible, the letter to the church of Pergamon. And here is the actual throne of Satan referenced in the Bible. So it was brought to Germany, right? Everything, always Germany. So the altar was monumental. It was constructed atop an acropolis in Pergamon. It was high, sweeping stairway. It was platform-like. Just wait till you see it. It's like a giant could sit on it. In ancient Greek religion, Zeus was considered the king of the gods, a colossal altar dedicated to him that dominated the skyline. Now, there was something else that was going on in Pergamon. It wasn't just that Christians were being killed and that they had pagan, the throne of Zeus, kind of Satan's throne there. They had begun something called imperial cult worship. Now, this is interesting and where I think Nicki Minaj comes in. Excuse me. The city had a strong allegiance to Rome. So what they did was they created temples dedicated to emperors. Public veneration of the Roman emperor as a god was compulsory in many areas of the empire. This forced worship could have been the context for believers being compelled to proclaim Caesar is Lord, which is conflicted with Jesus is Lord. Now, there was also a healing cult, right? Which was symbolized by the serpent. We're going to get into that deeper, so I'm going to leave that for now. That'll be closer to the end. The combined pressure of emperor worship, pagan temple rituals, and the city's devotion to multiple deities created an environment rife with persecution for Christians. The reference to Satan's throne could have encompassed all of that, the pagan and imperial worship that dominated Pergamon. Now, I want to show you what this thing looked like. Look at the screen, you guys. This is it in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. Doesn't look that big, does it? Watch when you see it with people. But look how ornate this is. I would love to see up close pictures of this, and I'm going to deep dive that eventually. But imagine that sitting at the top of a mountain overlooking a city that went down a hill. Right. So it would have sat here, right? And then you had the big auditorium. And then the city was, below it. That's what it would have looked like in a natural landscape. But it says, why is the altar of Zeus so important? It housed the most magnificent examples of sculptures of its time. The altar of Zeus is 12 meters high. It is a horseshoe shaped structure that sits on a square area with an edge of approximately 35 meters. So here you go. These are normal sized people walking in this thing. Look how big it actually is. It says the structure consists of 5-stepped foundations or steep foundations, a podium rising from the foundation, a belt of reliefs rising from the podium, marble columns rising from a belt, and a porch closing on the marble columns. Look at this. It says here, oh, okay, so this is interesting. In Greek mythology, these reliefs are like a formal parade of giants and gods. Giants and gods. Look at that. And I did find some information on the battle that Greek mythology says is going to happen. This is the word, and I'm going to mess it up, you guys, but it's like giant Amaka, the battle of the giants. So in Greek mythology, because we talked about Ragnarok yesterday, that's Norse mythology, but in Greek mythology, Zeus will fight the giants at something called the Battle of the Giants. And the winning god will symbolize Pergamon, and the losing giants will symbolize the enemy, the Galatians. So, you know, there's a book of Galatians in your body, the Church of Galatia. It was a group of people. They came through this area where the throne of Satan sat, Pergamon, and they battled. And it's a lot. It's so interesting, though. It says the frieze, which is this, sculptures show the battle of the gods against the giants. In the end, the gods are victorious. So that's what all of this would be, them battling. The gods are depicted with soft and thin lines, and the giants with hard and rough lines in the relief, including the reliefs of Zeus, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Okeanos, Orion, and Helios. There are 118 reliefs in total. That's a lot of carving, friends. The old gods are rising. Look at that, you guys. So look at not just that, look at the serpents. Look at the serpents coming out of the giants. It's like they're part. Okay, so this is a giant. See it? This is his elbow, his head, his body. You can see that his bottom of his body would have been a serpent. So they are combining serpents. Look, it's biting her. It's hit. He's fighting this god and this one, the giant is, but its tail's coming over and biting her. Wow. And that's where it would have sat, the throne of Satan right here, overlooking that. Oh my gosh. It was brought to Germany in 1897. So if you're from Germany, please go get some pictures and send them to me. Please send them to me. I would love to see it. All right, so let's go to Nicki Minaj real quick before I go any further. All right, so in Revelations 2:12-13, the Apostle John writes, the church in Pergamon, I know where you live, where Satan's throne is. Pergamon was a real city. There was a Christian congregation there in first century. The phrase Satan's throne could be symbolic or literal. The Pergamon altar was a massive altar built and dedicated to Zeus. It was located on the acropolis overlooking the city. It was built around the 2nd century after Christ was crucified. All right. It resembles a throne in shape, and it loomed over the city, right? It was a state power, divine authority, imperial ideology. Many biblical scholars and historians have suggested that when John wrote Satan's throne, he was referring to the Pergamon altar to Zeus because it looked like a throne. It was dedicated to a chief god. It represented pagan authority and it dominated the city skyline. Now, the other thing is what I told you, the emperor worship in Pergamon. So Pergamon was literally the center of the imperial cult, one of the first cities with a temple to Augustus, and Christians refusing the emperor worship faced persecution. So you have pagan temples, imperial authority, legal persecution, and religious coercion. So other scholars say Satan's throne is not necessarily Zeus's throne, but the system, right? So the altar was excavated, moved to Berlin, and reconstructed inside of a museum. Now, what I really want to focus on with you guys right now is Nicki Minaj. I find it very telling that she is on stage with the supposed divine. You guys say what you want. There are people, Christians, that are going to promote ERIKA KIRK as Esther. I am saying that the occult is using her as their divine feminine. As we're going to get into the studying of Kabbalah, which I firmly believe is the religious preference of President Trump and his family, his daughter and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and a lot of the people that are controlling in the background the strings, Kabbalah has to have a feminine side. I did a short for you guys. They believe God is masculine and feminine. So, we've got God, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, the Son. Well, now they need a divine feminine to rise. But Nicki Minaj actually tried to perform an exorcism on herself in 2012. It was part of the Grammy Awards. Now, I found a video that's going to show a little bit of it. It's hard to see because if you show the full screen, they will not monetize your video. So most people minimize it. But I will link everything in description and you can go look this up for yourself. So the name of her latest single, and this was in 2012, was Roman Holiday. And toward the end of Sunday's telecast, when she was doing the Grammy Awards, she came out and did a primetime exorcism on herself, or perhaps her alter ego, Roman Zelensky. She levitated, wreathed, and appeared to speak in tongues and romped through a stained glass window set surrounded by white robes celebrants. Of course, the Roman Catholics in, the audience weren't happy with her. So let me show this to you. This is the only one I found that I would be able to show y'all. So I'll link it.
Yo, I don't like none of that shit,
Look at
bro.
the bottom.
I would be honest, I see worse, but that part was a little creepy. You go.
Yo, chat say fuck the scammies.
Damn.
Yeah, I remember Grammys getting bashed.
Yeah, especially this year.
Yeah.
Woo.
Shit's fire.
Hey, the vibe just went from like, yo, we creepy as hell to like, hey, this shit gangsta.
She bodying it. Nah, I definitely agree with you on that.
That's all I'm going to show because I don't want my whole video taken down. I'll link it. Basically, she was strapped up on, like a medical table, which goes with the altar of Zeus. So I'm telling you, I'm fixing to tie all this in for you guys. And she's going, take your medication, Roman, take your medication, Roman, with the Catholic idolatry, the windows and the robed priest and priestess. You guys, fast forward to 2025, and she's on the stage with ERIKA KIRK saying the word assassin with JD Vance. Look, bro, if you want to write it off, write it off. Write it off. It was an accident. ERIKA laughed it off. It didn't mean anything, Samantha. That's fine. Go back to sleep, baby. Let me know. I'll send you a pillow. For the rest of us, let me deep dive into the Satan's throne and Pergamon, the things that you really need to know.
And I won't go through more details. Another thing that's famous about Pergamum, Eumenes II, who was one of the kings of Pergamum, there was a period where they were kind of in battle with Egypt. So Alexandria was a significant city, right? Cleopatra, all those people. So it was like a lot of grain came from there, but more importantly, papyrus, okay, paper came from Egypt. And when there was kind of some disputes over there, the king said, look, let's find a better writing material. They had already used animal skins for writing materials, but they had a contest, and basically the guy that came up with the writing material that they started using was called parchment. And parchment derives its name from the city of Pergamum. So the parchment was made with the skin of a young goat, and it went through this process. So one of the things I like to do when we're there, if we have time to go to the little tourist shopping.
Let me fast forward a little bit.
Ephesus, because Ephesus was just the far larger city, more important city, but Pergamum always retained its significance. Now, it's one of the most notable things is the very first temple to an emperor, 26 BC, was built in Pergamum to the Emperor Augustus and the goddess Roma. So the imperial cult, the worship of the emperor, did not start from the emperors demanding to be worshipped. It started from the people that wanted to show their loyalty and love and respect to the emperor in Rome. Everybody thinks Rome was bad. Better road system, clean water, medical advancements, right? I mean, they were the cutting edge of technology. And
they were the cutting edge of technology. Falling angels, anybody? Right? So there you go. You got Nicki Minaj and all of these rap artists always sitting in thrones, right? I think that is like symbology to Satan's throne. Because what did he say? It's the Roman goddess, Roma. Roma. That is who Nicki Minaj is trying to channel, is Roma. She may say Roman, but you and I know better. So I'm going to read for you guys Revelations, what we've been talking about here. Revelation 2:12. And to the angel of the church in Pergamos write, these things saith he which hath the sharp sword with two edges. Remember, the word of God is a two-edged sword. Okay. I know thy works and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is. And thou holdest fast my name and hast not denied my faith. Even in those days when Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth. But I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication, sex. So hast thou also them that hold the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. Okay, we're going to talk about them. Which thing I hate. Repent, or else I will come unto thee quickly, and will fight against them with the sword of my mouth. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saitheth unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saving the one that receiveth. Come on, Jesus. Now, I probably said that wrong when I said their names. They followed Nicholas of Antioch, all right, from Acts 6:5. So they called them Nicolaitans. That's what we're going to say. These people lived in Pergamon, right? They were supposed to be Christians. They were following Nicholas of Antioch's teachings from Acts 6:5. But they preached sexual immorality and participation in pagan feasts. What they said was, look, you have grace. You can behave how you want to behave as long as you know who you are, right? Moral compromise under the guise of Christian freedom. Now, a lot of the older writings, like Clement of Alexandria, described the Nicolaitans as teaching that bodily behavior didn't matter, encouraging indulgence while claiming spiritual purity. Some scholars question whether Nicholas himself actually taught this, or if they used his name to legitimize their movement, their cult. Now, I already told you about sexual immorality, which means they justified prostitution or ritual sex. How many people like Nathan Reynolds have you heard where they say our family looked Christian on the outside, but the sexual assault against the little people, under a certain age was tremendous. They blurred the lines between Christian worship and pagan ritual. They participated in temple feasts. So if they slaughtered the calf and burned it in the temple to a goddess, that meat was dedicated to that temple's god or goddess, that spirit. If you ate it, you were partaking in it. They said that you could do this. The Nicolaitans was like, oh, yeah. Yeah, eat that steak, bro. You're good. They also said that you had grace to cover your bad behavior. Personally, in Revelations, they say Balaam is like the Old Testament corrupter. If you go to New Testament, it would be like the Nicolaitans were the corruptors. Both of these types of religious movements compromised instead of persecution. So they would compromise to avoid persecution. They cared more about cultural accommodating others than standing separate from the world. Their loyalty was to power instead of faithfulness to God. None of this was accidental. If you look at the word Nikao, Nico, it means to conquer. Laos means the people. So the Nicolaitans were those who were going to conquer and subdue the people. But who were the people? The real Christians. That's you and I. So when you see this ecumenical movement happening, and you see Turning Point USA promoting somebody like Nicki Minaj and ERIKA KIRK as Christian, these are the modern day Nicolaitans. They are here to conquer and subdue the real children of Jesus Christ. These people promote spiritual hierarchy. Their leadership dominance is over believers. Let me see. Pergamon was a center of emperor worship, full of pagan temples, hostile to Christians who refused compromise. The Nicolaitans offered this belief system. You don't have to resist. You can blend in, but still be Christian. And that is not what Jesus taught at all.
So they wanted to show favor. So in AD 26, they built the first imperial cult temple. And once again, it always retained its significance as the first one. Now, by the end of the first century, there's at least 3 imperial cult temples, as well as numerous other temples. Cities competed over the right to build a temple to the emperor. And it was a thing of pride. And the title that a city would get with one of these temples was Neocorus, means temple warden. So it was a huge honor, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go. The biggest question that people have with, and I'll talk about the altar of Zeus in a moment, is twice he says where Satan has his throne, where Satan lives. So then the question is, why does he refer to Pergamum as the place where Satan lives? What a lot of interpreters have done over the years is try to figure out maybe he's describing something about the city that's connected with Satan. Okay. So when we look, there's a number of suggestions. So this is just the acropolis. Do I want to cover that? Yes, I do. This has nothing to do with the actual message to Pergamum. This actually has to do with Revelation 13. Can we turn there for a moment?
Now, this is going to get really interesting. He's fixing to talk about what's going to happen with before the Antichrist comes, okay? Now, remember, Revelation, the book of Revelation, never names the altar. The Bible does not say the altar of Zeus is Satan's throne, but it also doesn't speak abstractly. It speaks to people who lived in Pergamon that day, who saw that structure every single day of their lives. When somebody walked up and said Satan's throne, everyone would have known that you were referencing Zeus's throne. It was not a metaphor floating in the air. It was a visible power structure. A throne is not about worship. It's about authority, law, judgment, control. Pergamon was where imperial loyalty was enforced. Refusing to worship the emperor wasn't a private belief system. It was literally political defiance. That's why Revelation mentions Oedipus, a mortar killed in the city. That was not symbolic pressure. It was lethal. So my question to you is, why would they move that throne to Germany in the 1800s while also moving the obelisk out of Egypt and into New York, London, and Paris? I believe you are seeing the laying down of the groundwork of the Antichrist system. I keep saying that, but listen to what he says about what is coming.
I might cover Pergamum tonight and that's it, but it'll be worth it. It's sad that I've been to Pergamum so many times. Now when I go, it's like, let's go somewhere else. It just doesn't have the, I take that back. I'm always like a kid in the candy store. So in Revelation 13, you have 2 beasts. They're agents of the dragon. The dragon is identified as Satan. And the first beast rises out of the sea, likely indicating that this first beast represents some sort of like emperor figure. He's a foreigner. He's coming from the sea, right? So he's not coming from the land. The second beast comes from the land. And the first beast is the one who, receives a head wound and comes back and everybody worships this beast. The second beast is more like a priest. And what the second beast does is build a statue in honor of the first beast and forces everybody to worship that statue. Otherwise, face death and also face economic restriction. And so he forces everyone to receive a mark where they can't buy or sell. I want to talk about the statue for a moment, though. So in chapter 13, I'll begin in verse 11. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, right? Religious figure, but spoke like the dragon, right? Satanically inspired. I love that image of a false prophet. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf and made the earth and the inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth in order to set up an image or a statue in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give it breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It forced people, all people, great and rich, poor, free, slave, to receive the mark. Okay, so this statue. Now, if you watched people like Hal Lindsey or other kind of TV prophecy experts, and this is what I believed when I first started studying Revelation back when I was like 18, that this image of the beast that can speak and do things, they would say things like, well, this is like cable TV. They're able to see this image, i.e. an image, and it's leading the world, because how does he cause all the people around the world to worship it? Others have said that maybe it's some sort of robot that has some sort of magical powers. Some say that really it's just demonic inspiration. But lots of people have said, well, what is this talking beast? So glad you asked. This is actually from my first visit. They've done more work on this, but this is what they call the red basilica. It's called the red basilica because of the color of the bricks. But in the ancient world, it wouldn't have looked like that. The red bricks are under all the buildings, and what they do is when they build these buildings, they use bricks and marble, but then they place a marble facade around the whole thing. So panels of white marble would have coated all the way around. This was a temple just outside of Pergamum, outside of the acropolis, that was dedicated to two Egyptian gods. Because remember, the Romans were inherently religious, and they especially loved Egyptian gods. They felt like the Egyptians were such a powerful kingdom, and so they want to honor their gods. So Isis and Seraphis, they're twin kind of male-female gods from the Egyptian pantheon. And I wish I could express to you how massive these ruins are, right? They're huge. They tower. Okay, so we're coming in from the main doors, and if you look forward, you know, imagine a great hall, and in the center at the back is a elevated area. Do you see it back there? They've since done work on it. You can actually now walk up there and look into it and so forth. But that elevated altar, what sat upon it were two giant statues, one of Isis and one of Seraphis. So when worshipers would go in, because they have a question, a concern, something that they're concerned about, they want to know an answer to, they would go in and they'd see these statues and they would offer their prayers. Well, and then here, they've actually now have this statue set up, but this guy, I took a picture of him. He was actually recreating what one of these statues would look like. And kind of shows you, because he's basing it off of the ruins that they found around there. But here's the thing about these statues. They're hollow on the inside. They're hollow, completely hollow on the inside. Now, on this platform where those statues stood, there's an opening. And you can even see the secret tunnel that went underneath from the outside to the base of this platform. So as people would come in and they would have their prayer request, if you will, the priest would hear what they're asking for. And another priest would be underneath a statue and speak up into the base. And it gave the impression that the statue was talking to them. And so when you hear this idea of talking statues, this is something that doesn't require far-off future technology. This is something that they live with on a daily basis. Added to that, the evidence of these temples, there was a temple to Zeus. And the temple to Zeus was set up on a big rotating platform. You couldn't tell that it was rotating, but there was a lever in back that you could move it, and it would, like, as it's moving, it would kind of rumble. Well, Zeus is a god of thunder and lightning, right? Not as good as Thor, but good enough for the Greeks. And the statue would rumble, and get this, it had an uplifted arm. In that uplifted arm, have you ever seen those rain sticks? You know, you turn them and it sounds like rain, and it's just a bunch of sticks and pebbles and marbles dropping through them. They had basically that. So here's this giant 40-foot statue of Zeus, upraised arm, and when worshipers would go in, they would hear thunder. and they could hear the sound of rain. Not only that, in the upper part of this temple, they had openings with mirrors to kind of mimic the flashing of lightning. In fact, as more and more people do research on these ancient pagan temples, they find almost all of them had some sort of automaton, like a robotic type feature, to make them give the appearance of moving or doing something that impressed the worshipers. So I remember.
Well, I want to stop there, and I want to tell you that I believe that the Nicolaitans from 1st century Pergamon are what you see on the stage of Turning Point USA now. I just kind of believe that these weren't outsiders. These people, they were inside the church. Think of how many people said, go get how many pastors told you to do this? How many pastors shut down their doors during the sea out of fear, friends and family? Revelation condemns these people for teaching compromise. They encourage believers to participate in pagan practices while claiming loyalty to Jesus Christ. They were sexually immoral. There were idol feasts. They blended cultures. In other words, you don't have to resist. Where persecution fails, compromise succeeds. Pergamon did not need to destroy Christianity. It only needed to absorb it. You could benefit from it. You could belong to it. You could still call yourself faithful. That is why Christ's words were so severe in Revelations to the letter to the church of Pergamon. This is the exact same pattern that you and I saw with the moving of the London Bridge. Power doesn't always crush opposition. Sometimes it just relocates. Sometimes it's just reframed. Sometimes it invites it to stay as long as it stops resisting. The altar dominated by elevation, the Nicolaitans dominated by doctrine. Same system, different tools.
God of the theater. And that's part of the reason why, right? He could switch different roles. And so that was fitting for the theater. So there's the remains of the Temple of Dionysius. And so then that made me wonder, and I really don't have an answer for this. Since everything's connected to a god or goddess, would early Christians go to the theater? Like, we know there's debate about eating meat, but I've yet to find any sort of discussion on do they participate in things like just going to the theater to watch a good play. I have no idea. If y'all can figure it out for me, let me know. But anyways, I file that under questions that I have that I'll eventually find an answer for. And there's an artistic rendition of it. So some people see the throne of Satan as the Temple of Zeus, the Imperial Cult Temple. There's two others. One, some people say maybe it just refers to the city as a whole, sitting on top of that acropolis. Maybe it's just that looks like a throne. Okay. Another candidate that a lot of people reference is it was known, it had an Asclepion. Asclepius is the god of healing. His daughter, her name is Hygienia, right? Hygiene, right? And so this was a hospital complex that was also a temple, right? And people would go there and come from all over. In fact, one of the most famous ancient doctors that people still, if they're in medical school, still study him is Galen. He was a surgeon. He wrote a lot on anatomy by basically doing autopsies on gladiators, right? And he had all kinds of stuff that he wrote. Galen practiced here for a period of time before he became the surgeon to the emperor in Rome. So some people see, now, does anybody know what Asclepius's symbol is? It's a serpent. right? So even our modern medical with the wings and the cross symbol with a serpent wrapped around it comes from Asclepius as a god of healing. And I don't know too much of the myths, but one thing we do know is that they would use snake venom, a certain type of snake that was known to have healing properties. So the symbol of the serpent. Well, a lot of people look to this as the throne of Satan because in Revelation 17:9 or 12, I'm sorry, Satan is identified as that old serpent, the devil. So because of the symbol of serpents, some say this was probably the throne of Satan. I won't go into all the details about the Asclepion. We don't always go just for time, but it's always great to visit. Probably the coolest.
All right, one more bit from this and we're going to move on.
Was a Christian who was killed. That put everybody up. Luke, and Antipas. And it ends with Antipas getting killed for his faith. He becomes a Christian through the book. So Antipas was likely a Roman official. He was likely a noble. He was likely somebody who had power and influence in government, who then became a believer. And he was tried. And because he refused, he was killed. So he was a public figure, and he was a Christian who was killed. That put everybody else on alert, right? Jesus refers to him as my faithful witness. That word witness is a legal term. Almost identical when we talk about a witness in a trial. Call forth your witnesses. Somebody who's testifying to something they've seen, right? It's the same term. So the word for witness in New Testament, martyria, is the same kind of legal context. So likely, I think part of the connection there is he was faithful in his testimony about Jesus, and it cost him his life.
And it cost him his life. The Pergamon altar no longer overlooks the city. It sits inside of a museum. It's neutralized, it's contained, it's curated, but the warning to Pergamon remains. Pergamon remains. Power doesn't always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it offers peace. And sometimes the throne isn't outside the church. Sometimes it's tolerated within. I want to show you something. For you guys that stay on top of things, this is John Podesta. He worked a lot with the Clintons. It says 14 on his right hand and a fish on his left. What does it mean? As the story goes, Osiris was killed and chopped into 14 pieces. Isis was able to retrieve 13 of them, but the penis was lost, eaten by fish. She substituted another phallus and magically used it to bring Horus from dead Osiris. Now, all these obelisks that I've been showing you, these are the phallus. And these domes like this on the state capitol and stuff, these are supposed to be the wombs. Hillary's 2016 campaign chairman has long been a Washington insider. He was Bill's chief of staff. I have no doubt that he understands and practices the secret religion of the federal government, which is that of the illumined global elite. The iconic Washington Monument is the world's largest obelisk. That is what John Podesta is signaling in part. The Vesca Piscis figure seen around the giant phallus, right here, of Osiris is the divine feminine Isis and that fish phallus. You see it? You come down here, look again. They took the symbol and they tried so hard. It says Ithacus is an antichrist scam. It's an ancient pagan symbol. The X is the sun god. Yesterday, I did a whole video on the sun god. Go watch it. I'll link it. But you guys, this is not a joke, okay? It's all here. It's all here. This is all linked to Freemasonry. But this is really a sign of the act of sodomy, a ritual act through which he was very likely illumined and initiated into the ancient sun cult. The sign of sodomy, the square and compass, the circle inside of the squares. That's what his hands are supposed to be representing. And there's the circle. Yes, it's dark. And unfortunately, sex is a huge part of it. And if you read in the New Testament, Jesus tells us, friends and family, that sexual immorality, having sex outside of marriage, which is a beautiful thing, is created by God, enjoy it, married couples, go for it. But outside of that covenant with God, that is the only sin. That is a sin against God and a sin against yourself. It's the only one that carries a double sin, and it comes with a lot of ramifications. But that is why the occult uses it so very often. So we started with the London Bridge, a structure used for executions, intimidation, public obedience. It was quietly dismantled and quietly relocated to the Arizonian desert. Then we discussed ancient Egyptian obelisks, symbols of divine kingship, as they were removed from sacred geographical areas and planted in capitals of modern power. Today, we confronted the most explicit reference of all, a city named directly in Scripture, a place Jesus himself described the phrase that has echoed for 2,000 years. I know where you live, where Satan's throne is. God bless you. Thank you for your time.